Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm your host, Christian Harris, and I'm joined today by Jonathan Hayes, who's the Risk Management Director for Moto. As we'll hear, Jonathan has had a rich and varied career, starting off as an environmental health officer and working his way up to the senior position that he now holds. Because he's worked in a few different variations of the hospitality sector, he's got some great insights to share, some really interesting thoughts around how to sell, in inverted commas, safety, and the difference between doing that to the board and colleagues down to the shop floor, let's say. Also thinking about the difference between risk and safety and whether those words resonate to different people in different ways as well. Some interesting war stories about his time working in the environmental health profession. I won't spoil it, but quite interesting findings in some sea containers that he had. And we're also joined by one of Jonathan's very special co-workers who I think was ill off of school during the time that the podcast was being recorded. So it's a great episode. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm sure you'll get a lot from it as well. Jonathan's a great guy and really insightful. One of the interesting things he talks about as well is the benefits of partnering up with insurance companies and how they can help you in terms of risk management, but also navigating the pretty choppy waters out there at the moment in terms of insurance pricing. So I hope you enjoy this. If you do, please give us a review. Please hit subscribe. We really appreciate it. And please do feel free to connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn as well. Let's get on with it then and join my conversation with Jonathan. Jonathan Hayes, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast.
Thanks, Christian. It's great to be here and see you all again.
Yes, it's another Zoom meeting.
It's a while since we've met face to face, isn't it? I think it was playing snooker at the RAC club. I think it was our last face to face.
It probably was either that, or it would have been maybe one of the AirMic.
Yeah, probably we should go professional and say it was AirMic, shouldn't we?
I don't know how professional AirMic is.
I think it was probably yeah.
There's a veil of professionalism in the fact that it's a conference, but I think it's mostly about eating and drinking, isn't it?
I think that's mostly what I managed to do at AirMic last time, and I struggled to make the professional element just to fit in the request for meetings outside of the presentations.
Yeah. AirMic, for anyone that doesn't know, is an association of risk and insurance managers, isn't it, or directors? And every year they have a conference which is goes around the country, and there are stands from the big insurers, and effectively it's the insurers kind of putting on the hospitality, and the brokers putting on the hospitality for the risk managers.
Yeah, and I think it's in Bournemouth this year, or possibly Brighton, one of the two.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in Edinburgh, wasn't it?
Yeah, Edinburgh was it last year? Would have been last year. Yeah, which would have been a good trip. I think Edinburgh.
That would have been a good. Yeah, Edinburgh's a great city. Yeah. And AirMic almost always coincides with my birthday as well, which is always a bit weird. So it's like, what are you doing for your birthday? Oh, well, I'm going to an insurance conference.
I'm going out for dinner with insurers and brokers. Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, it depends on the date, but I normally kind of, because it's 3 or 4 days, I normally just sort of, I might be there on the morning of my birthday, but I typically come home and see my wife and my family for my birthday, rather than, much as I enjoy going out for dinner with yourself and others, it's probably nicer to be at home for your birthday.
I think so, yeah. Well, we've spent plenty of time at home in the last 18 months, so yes. Maybe actually you'll have to get away for this one, Christian.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That would next year I'll be hitting the RSA party and going to the Zurich Fest and all this other stuff. Lots of insight.
Well, I know that. Yeah. I know that having not been away as much as I would normally be away over the past 18 months, my wife's going, well, come on, when are you going away? I need my space too.
Yes, that's an unintended downside of the pandemic, I suppose.
Yeah.
So other than going to boozy conferences, what was it that got you into this world of safety and risk? You know, where did your kind of passion for this area come from?
Well, my enthusiasm for this area stems, I guess, from my days at school, and a chance discussion with my biology teacher about, what should I do after school, in terms of a university or a career, and she suggested that I would like or would find interesting environmental health.
Okay.
So I went and did some work experience with the local environmental health team in Leicester, and enjoyed. I enjoyed the mix of the technical, the practical, plus the thinking side of it. And the you're not based in an office all week. You're out and about. You're meeting people, and you're helping to make a difference to people's lives in some way.
Yeah.
So that that sort of got me interested in environmental health, and so I did. Went and studied environmental health at university, which was great fun, and got a placement. Did my year out in Suffolk, and ended up getting employed down in Suffolk as an environmental health officer for the first 8 years of my career. So I've worked I worked down at Felixstowe Docks for the first 18 months of my career, inspecting food and inspecting large container ships for rats, which obviously you didn't have to find a rat on a large container ship. But you still had to issue a D-rat certificate in those days.
Okay.
And I moved up into a role where I was split between food safety and health and safety for the first half of the week, and then environmental protection, sort of noise pollution, the second half of the week. So it gave me a sort of good opportunity to sort of see lots of the areas of environmental health work.
Good broad variety.
Yeah, which I advocate to, I think, anybody who's starting a career is try and do as broad a bunch of stuff, I guess, as you can in your early career, because then you can really home in on what your passion is and what interests and excites you.
Yeah. Well, a question I often get asked when I do podcasts is, why should people consider a career in safety and risk? And that's one of the answers that I give, that actually you get such a broad understanding of how things work, which is really very valuable. And actually, I think if you want to end up as running a business one day, there aren't many better proving grounds. Of course, you need to be able to sell at some point, I guess, if you want to get fairly high up, but then health and safety is about selling stuff in some way, because you're trying to influence people, and you need to know your numbers, but then you need to know your numbers in health and safety as well. So I think actually it's a really good proving ground for business.
No, I think you're right, Christian. I think that ability to sell, I guess, not just you, but the message that you're trying to sell. So you as a credible individual, with a credible message and an authentic message, I think is important, but also one that then provides the moral, rationale for why you need to act or behave in a certain way as a business operator or owner. And I think that's one of the key challenges we all face in safety and risk is being persuasive in the messaging and making sure our message hits the mark with the budget holders and with the people who ultimately have the liabilities.
Yeah, good, very good point. So what was the strangest thing you found in a shipping container then?
The most offensive thing I found in a shipping container has to be an entire container of cans of tuna, which had exploded on the way over through
they've been heated up and
defective canning process, and then sat in a warm metal box for 5 or 6 weeks. So when the guys on the docks opened that container, that was not a pleasant. It was not a pleasant sight or smell.
No, I can imagine. But at least there were no rats.
There were no rats in that one. If there were, they probably died of toxin poisoning or something.
Yeah.
Or died of just eating too much tuna, I think.
Yeah, tuna's good for you, but not as your sole source of.
I have struggled with canned tuna pretty much ever since that.
Yeah, well,
that time.
I can imagine that. Yeah, it's people that said I've spoken before with people that work in chocolate factories, for example, and your initial response is, "Oh wow, like amazing," but they're like, "No, we're off chocolate now. We just can't stomach it."
No, well, that I can understand that. Yeah, that pretty much did tuna for me as a canned good.
Yeah. I'm sure a nice tuna steak would be okay though. That's a different.
Yeah, yeah. You know, a rare cooked tuna steak in a decent London or any eatery would, you know, at the moment would go down well, I think.
Yes. No. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you moved into the restaurant world, didn't you? After that.
yeah, yeah. I moved into a role, a risk role with Little Chef and Travel Lodge, who were separating away from the Compass Group at the time. Um, and so that was an interesting time because we were part of a management team brought in to try and recover Little Chef in terms of reputation and business in effect, because it was struggling. But that was a challenge just because of the, unfortunately, the ingrained mentality of a lot of the staff was just, I think, beyond recovery at that point, and the estate wasn't in the best of condition anyway. We certainly spent a fair amount of time getting to sites before the EHO did to try and affect some controls before they managed to get to us. It was an interesting 18 months with them.
Very interesting. And then what your next move was? Hospitality.
Yeah. So I moved across ways, I guess, into cinemas, and joined View Entertainment when they were just becoming the fledgling business that they are now, in effect. You know, so we merged 2 or 3 cinema chains that they bought across the UK and Europe into the View brand. So that was interesting. That had its own challenges with the issues around darkness, steps, and people who were carrying a bucket of popcorn, a couple of liters of Coke, and looking at a big white square ahead of them rather than looking at where their feet are. So we had plenty of slips and trips in the dark. And did a lot of work to improve auditorium lighting and safety just by design, in effect, over those years. So that was quite interesting, some of those projects. And we opened the cinema. I think it was probably the first cinema that was in the O2 after after the O2 closed as the exhibition venue. So that was a huge, that was about 3,500 seat auditorium with a monster screen.
Wow,
that was an interesting project.
I don't think I've ever been. You know, I live quite close to the O2. You know, I don't think I've ever been to the cinema there. Saying that, I've hardly been to the cinema at all since my oldest son was born. I think I've only ever watched like kids things.
Children tend to make things like impromptu trips to the cinema or a thing of the past, don't they?
Yeah.
Unless you're both off and take like the 2 o'clock or the 1 o'clock show midweek.
Yeah, there's a cinema in Dulwich which did, and I'm probably is doing now again, but kids shows. So they would show like cartoons or whatever, and they were normally about half an hour to 40 minutes. So I've been to a number of those with the kids, but we haven't managed to do a proper cinema visit for ages. So I have to add that.
No, in some ways, lockdown was quite a blessing, because I haven't had to sit through any Tinkerbell movies recently with the children on a Saturday morning.
Well, we've had to watch Moana like 100 times on Disney, which is fine because it's a fun movie, and they enjoy it, so that's the main thing. That's the main thing. And then obviously your current role is in transport. Well, hospitality and transport.
Yeah, hospitality, transport, I guess logistics. Moto infrastructure. So I work for Moto, so we're the UK's largest operator of motorway service areas. So we tend to design, build, and then operate our sites across the UK. I think we've got 56 locations on the motorway network. 5,500 employees and postmen. And about 130 million customer visits a year. So that keeps us on our toes in terms of we've swapped the dark space and people's inability to walk downstairs from the bright space, and people who've lost the ability to walk having sat in their car for 2 or 3 hours, or sat on a coach for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Interesting. So very different areas and sectors and that you've worked in with some commonalities, but I mean, have you seen that these were all very different in terms of the risks, or do you find that actually there's some common areas that are kind of always applicable?
I think, I mean, I've always tried to take the approach wherever I've worked that I think health and safety and risk management is relatively simple. It's about, you know, what are the things that people can hurt themselves on, and how do you work to eliminate them or reduce them to a safe level. You know, all those types of businesses that I've worked in have had an element of food, you know, and food service.
Yeah.
You know, have had customers on them, you know, or interacting with them. So footfall, and you know, every workplace has colleagues, you know, that require, you know, support, you know, mentoring and protecting, as you know, so they can deliver their role for their customers and for our customers in a safe way. You know, so for me, it's just about using a common sense approach and not overcomplicating safety as much as and risk management as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's very pragmatic and very sensible. And going back to what we touched on earlier about how to influence and persuade, you know, the more simple a message you can put across, I guess the more effective that must be. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, in my experience in hospitality, well, in fact, with any board interaction, you don't get lots of time and lots of space to make your case. You've got to be able to concisely put your case and put the morality and the business benefits of whatever you're proposing, you know, succinctly and with a clear strategy and plan.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's been my approach to how we've managed challenges. You know, at the moment we're working through the challenges that test and trace is creating. As it, I don't know if it winds down or not. Really, I'm not sure if it's winding down, judging by the number of isolations that I know we're getting and that we're seeing across the hospitality sector at the moment, which creates, you know, its own challenges for people operationally.
Yeah, there's talk of. I mean, we're recording this on the 5th of July, and I think Boris is making his announcement, isn't he, this afternoon? But there's talk of getting rid of the school bubble isolation, self-isolation, you know, quarantining thing, isn't there as well? So whether that extends into workplaces, I don't know. But certainly, I know a lot of businesses that have been, you know, had to close for 10 days because actually one person is diagnosed, and that's it. You know, and that wipes everyone out, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult balance. I think for those that have got to make this decision or make the decisions at the moment. On the one hand, you've got a largely vaccinated adult population, and to a certain extent, nearly double vaccinated adult population. I guess what are we, probably around about 45 million first dose adults, and probably 20-25 million second vaccinated adults. I think
possibly even a bit higher than that, but yeah,
possibly. Yeah, as I'm just going the figures that I recall from last, and then, but of course, in hospitality, the problem we were all facing is that lots of our frontline colleagues fit into that sort of 16 to you know, under 30 age group who may not have had any vaccinations yet. And so you know, doing the right thing to protect them is a challenge in itself. And you know, do you wait for them all to be double vaccinated before you change things, or do you just, one of the conversations, or one that, you know, I've had on other podcasts with other people is, well, we've never really as a country talked about what the acceptable level of COVID risk is, you know, and where's the acceptable caseload versus the level of hospitalization and therefore death. And it feels, you know, listening to Boris at the moment, that, you know, and with Sajid Javid as the new health minister secretary, that there's a bit of a change coming, I think, in the messaging from government now. You know, that there's, you know, we can tolerate an increase in cases, providing that's not impacting on the NHS and causing additional mortality.
Yeah. It's I had a podcast with a couple of environmental health professionals, Richard and Tony.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah,
and the discussion there was interesting because they had quite opposing views about this. But my own personal view is that I think we're never going to eradicate this, certainly not in the foreseeable future, because the only way it's going to be eradicated or close to eradicated is once the whole world is vaccinated, and that's going to take a huge amount of time. So all we can really do is try and be sensible and pragmatic and protect ourselves. And it's just about monitoring the deaths and hospitalizations, isn't it? Really, the cases are in some ways irrelevant. But
well, I did an interesting podcast maybe a month ago now with it was for an American conference, and there was a Canadian, there was a lady based in India, I think, and another lady who worked for a travel company. So there was an interesting range of views from different global perspectives at that time, and it was interesting. The commonality of the themes were all around, ventilation and spacing, really, and trying to manage cases to allow society to open up, because we can't stay in a form of lockdown forever. We have to accept this as a disease that exists, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, from my perspective, and speaking to friends, if you think about a person's life, it's almost back to normal in many ways anyway. But obviously it's not for so many businesses where you've got decreased capacity and you can't be profitable and all this other stuff. So you kind of, whilst normal life has almost returned to many people, that isn't reflective of really what's going on and in terms of the economy.
No, well, it certainly feels. I mean, we've been having lots of debates as we come into the sort of the height of the summer travel season as to what's it going to feel like, in our sites and within the motorway space, as lots of people travel, particularly across the UK, they're staycationing, and what then the perception of safety is, and what's the balance for customers and colleagues in terms of physical numbers of people in buildings. And if we see the measures that exist, like the 2 meter distancing, relaxed, or removed come the 19th, what does that do to the mood on sites? What does taking away, taking away the legal requirement to wear a mask mean? If that becomes advisory, what's the impact on public perception and colleague perception?
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting, couple of weeks, I think, until we see what the measures are. But then I think an interesting summer once we know what the measures will be.
Yes, and it's then how to deal with the loud minority as well, isn't it? Because you might have 80% of people happy with however it shakes out, but there's always going to be the vocal minority who are causing a fuss one way or the other. There's going to be some people saying it's too much and some people saying it's not enough.
Well, you're right, because we've been a fairly unique in some ways in that we've always been allowed to have internal seating over the last 18 months under an exemption, because we're providing
people are there to rest,
a rest space for travellers, particularly key workers and HGV drivers. So that having had seating, even very, very spaced out, has been a point of contention for a lot of travellers and to be fair, regulators who perhaps haven't fully understood or read the law.
Yes, that's always a challenge.
Especially police officers who don't understand that it's them that have the legal requirement or the legal powers to enforce wearing of masks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's very.
But
so you mentioned about the sort of, I think the word you used was the moral case and then the business case in terms of how to sell, quote unquote, the benefits of safety to the board. Interested to get your view on which of those resonates more, and is it different going up to the board as it is trying to go down to the workforce to sort of try and get the messaging carried out and whatever the decision is by the board actually delivered throughout the business?
That's a good question, Christian. I think that it all depends on the personalities you have in your boardroom and amongst your colleague base. I would say that I've worked with boards where the money argument has been more prevalent than perhaps the moral argument. But at the same time as saying that, there's been moments when the moral argument has just completely overridden any consideration towards the money argument, if that makes sense. And I think it depends a little bit on, I think, those individual board members' personal experiences and whether they've ever had to face a courtroom, or sit in a coroner's court or sit in a crown court while sentencing is passed on your business, and you're listening to how your business is being described or being discussed. I think with colleagues, it's always a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think we're almost programmed as people to find the path of least resistance to doing something. And, you can, as a safety practitioner, you can spend infinite amounts of time in a bubble writing procedures and policies and gold plating standards. But if you then watch the shop floor and see how they then find ways to circumvent them, you can save yourself a lot of time, I think, by engaging them in the first instance and figuring out what the tricks are. It's like I guess it's like anything, isn't it? I've got a friend who's a head teacher, but who was also probably the naughtiest boy in the class as well from his time at school.
Yeah.
When we were at school together, and he certainly spent most of his life outside my dad's office because he was the head teacher. And he now tells the kids, look, don't try and con me because I know all the cons in the book. So if you can engage, I guess, with your colleagues, in a proactive discussion around, well, why are you doing that way? Why aren't you doing it the logical safety way?
Yeah.
You then find that, I guess, the balance, don't you, in terms of reaching the pathway that protects colleagues, but also, protects the business and doesn't impact on their productivity.
Yeah, I think it's making it as simple as possible for colleagues, but also I think nobody wants to feel responsible for their friend getting hurt or or whatever. So I think trying to play up that sort of moral side a little bit is always powerful, because it just brings it home a bit, doesn't it? If that's all well and good, but what if you do that and Dave, who you work with, slips and hurts himself, or picks that thing up and hurts his back, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think you also think you're invincible, don't you, until you either witness something, or you're involved in an accident yourself. I remember as a relatively young EHO, I was involved in the peripheries of a fatal accident investigation where a warehouse forklift truck operator had crashed into some racking in a warehouse and literally had 300 tons of iron filings fall on top of him from the shelving, and the racking collapsed. And he obviously died. But that I think it took nearly 3 days to find his body amongst the filings. And being on the edge of that case, certainly I think brought some of what we were learning home to me and a couple of other sort of younger colleagues at the time, around why we were doing what we were doing and why workplace safety is important, and why it matters to people.
Yeah, it's true that a fatality is, very unique. I obviously with what I do, there aren't many, but I was involved with one in 2015, which was a guy who slipped over in a co-op store in Truro. It's all in the public domain, obviously, and banged the back of his head and died. And going in and looking at that was a very different feeling to going in as I do all the time and look at something where somebody's broken their wrist, or it does really bring it home that even these innocuous things, or people perceive as innocuous, like a slip or something, can cause very, very serious accidents and injuries.
Yeah, I think, and there's a risk of, we all get a bit complacent, don't we, over, if our accident rates start falling, or we suddenly don't see, the incidents coming through to validate the decisions that you're trying to make in the business. The argument for selling, I guess, safety becomes a lot harder, because the perception is, well, we're not having the problems, so why do we need the safety?
That's safety can be a victim of its own success, because when you're doing well, you're not having the incidents, and therefore they don't see the costs, and therefore they think, well, why are we spending this money? And you kind of get this potentially vicious circle, don't you?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe where the wider risk piece comes into play, doesn't it? Because you then have to sort of think package safety is just an element of a wider risk management approach in a business, and um, use those other tools that you have as a particularly a risk practitioner, I guess, with safety in your brief, around working with insurers, and using some of those other business tools that get you in front of, I guess, like the shareholders and the audit and risk committees and other decision makers to think about risk and safety in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and that brings me on to something that I was keen to talk to you about, actually, because you've started off as an environmental health professional looking at safety, and you've now developed into a very senior risk management director. How do you see the difference between safety and risk, and which resonates more with you? Which do you think is important is the right word, but where do you think people should focus their efforts?
Clearly, they are all important. Let's not underplay the importance of any of it. I think a lot depends on the organisation in which you're able to you're working in, and also the role in which you're able to play within the organisation, and how your skills and your skill set are regarded by the leaders in that organisation. I mean, I've been quite lucky in that joining Moto with a safety focus. I had a quite specific brief when I joined Moto, but my background in environmental health allowed me to look at other things within the business, and also, we had a few incidents that including a large fire and another. I mean, which coincided with the ash cloud events of several years ago, which meant that several more senior people in the business weren't available. So I ended up managing a fire claim. Meant that I think I picked up some greater experience. So for me, I think I see safety as an element of risk management, as alongside food hygiene, alongside environmental compliance, alongside fire, alongside insurance, alongside resilience. I think they're all blocks in that sort of Lego kit, as it were, of building organizational risk management and safety compliance. I would encourage people. I mean, I did it when I joined Moto. I relatively quickly changed the way that the team was focused on, away from health and safety to risk, and changed the language to risk rather than safety, because it then changes the dial a little bit with other departments and other senior colleagues who then, for some reason, risk resonates with them, with businesses in a different way to safety. Safety is seen as a compliance function in many businesses. Risk is seen as a bit wider and a bit more supportive in some ways. And changing that dial and the team's sort of role, and the remit, I guess, helps them to engage more widely. And so I would encourage safety practitioners to, who are working out there to engage in risk and with risk, if that's a standalone or a separate function in your business, and work together, which I'm sure colleagues do anyway. But if you're in that standalone role, take that wider view and ask that why question and knock on that door.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, I don't know what the best way of putting it is, but it's maybe a bit more of a grown-up conversation about risk, and it's, as you say, it's a bit higher up. It just resonates more with the CEO and the CFO, because risk is something that's a bit more. It's just a term, isn't it? That's more all-encompassing and more serious, I suppose, than safety.
I don't really get why, but it just seems to resonate that little bit more with C-suite holders.
I think it might just be, we've had this debate for years, haven't we, about health and safety gone mad and things like that. Whereas you never hear risk management gone mad, because people understand that risk management is critical. Whereas there's this kind of pigeonholing of safety sometimes, incorrectly, I think. But
well, absolutely. I remember my colleague dealing with a customer complaint some years ago, and the customer, I think, came back to him and said, well, your company must be really bad if you have to employ a risk manager. And my colleague just said, when I said, well, it's so bad, we employ a risk director.
Yeah, but then people also look at, if you're not in the world of doing it, people look at risk as, they think of the negative connotations of risk rather than the positive opportunities that risk presents as well, don't they? So
yeah, I've just been joined by a small person. Not yet. No. Do you want to say hello to Christian?
Hello.
Hello. No, you're not having a nice lolly now. You go away. Come on.
I was doing a podcast interview a few weeks ago in the evening, because I often do these in the evening, and my 6.5-year-old came downstairs. He said, "Daddy," he was knocking on the door, and I was trying to ignore him. Then he opened the door, and I was trying to shoo him away, sort of off camera. And then he's like, "Daddy, I saw a dragon head."
Well, Charlie had a right meltdown on Saturday because we went to a friend's house for dinner, and I found him loading my car up with stones from the drive, and so I grabbed them and threw them back on the drive, and he had a right meltdown. But it turns out he was, our friend who we were having dinner with is an entomologist, and so he was actually collecting from the drive dinosaur teeth to show Ross. And I'd thrown his dinosaur teeth away that he'd been collecting all afternoon.
Oh no!
So so I was
What a terrible father you are.
I know. Well, we said Ross will have plenty of animal teeth, from his travels around the world. So let's go and look at Ross's teeth collection.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that section in because I think that's good fun, and everyone will enjoy that. So bringing you back full circle, then we started off talking about AMIC, and you touched on insurance there as part of risk. Do you want to just give us a bit of a flavour for some of the opportunities that you've been able to leverage, I suppose, by working with your insurer, and what kind of resources that's been able to unlock and the benefits that's brought to the business?
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite lucky, I guess. Well, not lucky. We've been fortunate through good relationships to work with our current insurer for probably just over a decade on terms of the property casualty liability side. We early on wanted to create a relationship together and build something together. And that included a fairly intense piece of risk management work, and allowed us to use risk engineering and use their risk engineering experts to help us focus on our key property risks. And for us, that's quite significantly around fire. Can you hear the noise in the background?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Can I just have 5 minutes, please?
My channel keeps going on channel 8.
Okay, well, let me look at the channels and we'll talk in a few minutes. Okay, give me 5 minutes. Okay, all right. You go find mummy.
I don't know where she is.
Well, if you know where she is, go and find her. Yeah. So, I mean, working with their loss engineers and the brokers and the account management team and to be fair, the underwriters, the whole group, getting everyone together has helped them to understand the nature of our risk and the unique challenges that maybe some of our buildings have, in terms of the multiple interactions that take place on them. And we've been able to benefit from the experience and the expertise of the loss engineers through, things like through fire risk assessment, for example. We worked really closely with them to design an internal fire risk assessment process to pick up on what matters to them as the insurer, from that perspective, but also to cover the elements that matter to us as a business and the legal elements of that. And we've done other work with them around things like slip and trip testing, floor surface testing. We've worked with companies such as yours to look at floor surfaces across, because we operate lots of brands and we don't always have full control over what the brand specifies in terms of the finishes, and that sometimes creates challenges in terms of where we'd like a floor surface to be relative to what their brand team have decided is the floor spec. And
Yeah.
the two don't always align in terms of safety or expectations.
Yeah, and there'll be other examples of that as well in terms of like how they set up screens and whatever. I'm sure there's all sorts of examples of that. It's something that I talk a lot about is actually trying to build that partnership approach, and I talk about that to insurers and I talk about that to businesses as well, because I kind of feel like often you're a rarity that you've done that and built that relationship, and often these things are dealt with in a more transactional way, and I don't think that really benefits anybody, to be honest.
No, I mean, we were for a number of years quite transactional in our relationship with insurers. We chased the price and we jumped market to market for a number of years until pretty much we found the partner that resonated with us as a risk team, as a business, and and they wanted to work with us as well. So finding that partner, the right partner, I think is the key part of that relationship, and then you can start building on that and leveraging the benefits of that partnership. I mean, we've just done that to a degree, having renewed with them last week, in effect, and being able to leverage the benefit of our relationship to get over some rocky turbulence in the insurance market.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question because insurance rates have been skyrocketing for the last 18 months, 2 years, and to me, one of the outcomes, the benefits of having a partnership-based approach with your insurer is that you can ride out some of those storms. So is that played out, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for the bigger insurances that we buy, it certainly played out because we've been able to work together to smooth some of those bumps.
Yeah.
On some of those more transactional insurances like D&O and cyber and crime. Yeah. Some of those are just pricing. The pricing structure baffles me, to be frank, in terms of where they. I think it baffles the brokers as well at times, where they think people can find the premiums for some of those policies at the time when businesses generally have been struggling to I guess stay afloat at times. In some cases.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I was chatting to an insurer a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that on their financial lines, their loss ratio was 200% for years and years. So in other words, they were making a thumping loss on all of these policies. So therefore, there has to be some kind of adjustment. But I don't know whether that's reflective of the whole market or just them and they've been mispricing. I don't know, but I don't know. It's difficult because everyone's in business to make a profit, so you can kind of see why the insurers need to make a profit. But then, is that going to negatively affect the clients?
Well, it doesn't help that relationship, does it? When you see your insurance terms suddenly, I guess double or triple, based on whatever the marketplace is. I think, but we said it a moment ago. Having that partnership certainly helps to ride that out. With the broker as well as the insurers. Finding that team you can work with that resonate together. Work together is key.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. Well, Jonathan, I know you've got a pressing engagement, so I don't want to keep you for any longer than the 5 minutes that were agreed. But before we wrap up, where can people get hold of you? Social media things, or anything you wanted to plug, or any events you're doing, or any other podcasts or anything like that? Then the floor is yours for that.
No, I mean, people can find me on LinkedIn, Jonathan Hayes, or give me a call, drop me an email. More than happy to talk to anybody who wants to chat or who can help. We can help each other mutually in terms of knowledge and opportunities.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. Lots of good takeaways there. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Christian.